Two rose bushes, same variety, same garden center, planted the same weekend, a few feet apart in the same bed. It's now midsummer, and one of them is a tall, leafy fountain throwing out one flush of blooms after another. The other is short, scraggly, half bare, and pushing out a sad little flower here and there. Same sun, same soil, same rain, and yet one of them is racing ahead while the other is stuck in slow motion. So what happened? The gap comes down to 7 things the bigger bush got and the smaller one didn't. 7 tricks that quietly double or triple the speed a rose grows. And here's my promise to you. By the end of this video, you'll be able to look at any rose, including your own, and spot exactly which of these it's missing. None of this is the tired, give it sun and prune in spring advice you've already heard 1,000 times. This is the real mechanical reason one rose explodes and another just sits there. And trick number 4 is the one that's going to stop you in your tracks. It feels completely wrong, like you're sabotaging your own plant, and it's one of the most powerful things you can do. Let's figure out what the bigger bush knew. Trick 1. Get the bud union right, or nothing else matters. Before we touch feeding, pruning, or watering, we have to talk about the one thing that's already decided before your rose even wakes up: how deep you planted it. Most roses you buy are grafted. That means a flowering variety has been joined onto a tough rootstock, and the joint between them is that swollen, knuckly lump near the base called the bud union. Where you set that lump relative to the soil line quietly controls how fast or how slowly your rose will ever grow. Here's the mechanism. If you plant with the bud union sitting high and exposed, like a lot of people do without thinking, that joint dries out, bakes, and gets stressed. A stressed union is slow to push new canes, so the whole plant idles in low gear for its first year or two. Set it correctly, and the union stays protected, the graft heals fast, and the plant pours its energy into top growth instead of just trying to survive. The simple rule: in mild, warm climates, plant so the bud union sits right at or just barely below the soil surface. In colder regions, bury it deeper, a couple of inches under, to shelter it from frost. And here's the bonus most people never hear about. When you bury that union, the flowering variety above it will often start sending out its own roots over time, on top of the rootstocks. A rose growing on its own roots is frequently tougher and more vigorous for the long haul. So planting depth isn't a fussy detail, it's the foundation every other trick is built on. Trick 2. Water the feet, never the face. Now let's fix the habit that's silently throttling more roses than anything else: how you water. The instinct is to grab a hose or a can and shower the whole plant from above, leaves and all. It feels generous, it feels like a good soak, and it's quietly capping your rose's growth in 2 separate ways. First, the obvious one. Roses are thirsty, hungry plants with deep roots, and a light sprinkle only wets the top inch of soil. The roots never get a reason to drive downward, so you end up with a shallow root system that dries out the moment you skip a day and can never support fast top growth. What you want instead is to water deeply and less often, a long, slow soak straight at the base that drives moisture well down into the soil, then a gap before the next one. That trains the roots to go deep, and deep roots are the engine behind every fast-growing rose. And second, and this is the part people miss completely, when you splash water all over the foliage, you're rolling out the welcome mat for black spot and mildew, the fungal diseases that strip a rose's leaves bare. And here's why that destroys growth. Leaves are the solar panels. A rose covered in healthy green foliage is photosynthesizing at full power, building the sugars it needs to grow fast. A rose that's lost half its leaves to black spot has had its engine cut in half. So keep the water at the roots, keep the leaves dry. And if you do water from above, do it early in the morning so the sun dries everything quickly. Dry leaves are fast-growing leaves. Trick 3. Feed it like the glutton it is. Here's where roses flip the script on almost every other plant in your garden. A lot of plants resent being fed too much. Roses are the opposite. They are flat out greedy.
and a rose that's running on empty simply cannot grow fast no matter what else you do. If your rose is pale, slow, and stingy with blooms, there's a very good chance it's just hungry. So feed it properly, on a rhythm, a balanced rose feed as growth kicks off in spring, and again after the first big flush of flowers to fuel the next one. But here's the trick that separates the people growing decent roses from the people growing monsters, and it's an old Rose Society secret almost nobody outside that world knows: alfalfa. Plain alfalfa meal or pellets, the same stuff sold as animal feed. You either scratch a few handfuls into the soil around the base or steep it in a bucket of water to make a tea and pour that on. Why does dried hay do anything? Because alfalfa contains a natural compound called tricontaniol, a genuine plant growth stimulant. It acts almost like a hormone, and it's especially good at triggering basal breaks, those thick, strong new canes that shoot straight up from the very base of the plant. Those basal breaks are the canes that rebuild and expand your rose. A bush that throws several of them in a season looks like a completely different plant by autumn. Feed the rose richly, slip in the alfalfa, and you've handed it both the fuel and the signal to grow. Trick 4. Steal its flowers. This is the one I told you to wait for. To make your rose grow faster and bloom more, you have to take its flowers away from it. Sometimes the very first flowers you've been waiting all season to see. I know exactly how that sounds. You bought a rose to get roses, and here I am telling you to cut them off, and in some cases, pinch off the buds before they ever open. It feels like self-sabotage. It's actually the smartest thing you can do. And once you understand why, it'll change how you treat the plant forever. Here's the mechanism, because the why is everything. A rose doesn't flower for your benefit. From the plant's point of view, a flower has one job: to be pollinated, fade, and form a seed pod, what's called a hip. And the moment a rose sets a hip, it gets a powerful internal signal that says, "Mission accomplished, you can stop now." Growth and flowering wind down, because as far as the plant is concerned, it's already done its job for the year. So if you let those spent flowers sit on the bush and turn into hips, you are literally telling your rose to slow down. Now flip it. When you snip off each bloom the moment it starts to fade, cutting back to a healthy set of leaves before it can ever form a hip, the plant never gets that mission accomplished signal. It stays stuck in striving mode, convinced it still has a job to do. So it keeps pushing fresh growth and a whole new round of flowers. That's the real reason regular deadheading makes a rose bloom in waves all season instead of one and done. And here's the harder, even more powerful version of this for a young or newly planted rose. In that first year, pinch off the flower buds before they open at all. Yes, sacrifice the blooms entirely, because every bit of energy the plant isn't spending on flowers and seeds goes straight into building roots, canes, and structure instead. You give up one season of so-so flowers, and in return you get a vigorous, established powerhouse that outgrows and outblooms its neighbors for years. Stealing the flowers feels backwards right up until the moment you watch the plant explode with growth. That's the one nobody believes until they try it. Trick 5. Cut harder than you dare. If trick 4 made you nervous, this one's going to test you. Because the single most common way people hold their roses back is being too gentle with the pruners. They give the bush a timid little trim, nipping the very tips, terrified of cutting too much. And the rose responds with weak, twiggy, tired growth, because a soft prune sends a soft signal. Roses are built to be cut hard. A bold prune doesn't weaken the plant, it triggers it. When you cut a cane back significantly, you're concentrating all of that root system's stored energy into far fewer growing points, and the plant answers with thick, strong, fast new shoots instead of a tangle of thin ones. So in late winter or early spring, before the plant fully wakes, prune with conviction. Take it down hard, removing a good chunk of the previous year's growth on most modern bush roses. But cut with intention, because where and how you cut matters as much as how much. Make each cut just above a bud that faces outward, away from the center of the plant. That bud becomes a new shoot, and because it points outward, it grows away from the middle, opening the bush into a vase shape with a clear, airy center. That open center is doing real work. It lets light reach deep into the plant and lets air flow through, which keeps the foliage dry and disease-free. Light in, air through, dead leaves gone. That's a rose photosynthesizing at full tilt. While you're at it, cut out anything dead, anything spindly and weaker than a pencil, and any two branches rubbing against each other. Be brave with the pruners. The rose isn't asking you to be careful, it's asking you to be decisive. Trick 6. Give it a magnesium wake-up. This one's small, cheap, and weirdly effective, and it targets two specific weak points that quietly slow roses down. The fix is magnesium, and the easiest source is plain Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate, the same stuff sold for soaking sore muscles. A spoonful or two worked into the soil around the base in spring, or dissolved in water and poured on, can make a real difference. Here's why it works. Magnesium sits at the literal center of every chlorophyll molecule, the green pigment that lets leaves capture sunlight. When a rose is short on magnesium, you see it. The older leaves go yellow between the veins, while the veins themselves stay green, a tired, washed-out look. And a rose with weak yellowing leaves is, again, a rose running its solar panels at half power. Top up the magnesium and the foliage greens up deep and rich. Photosynthesis ramps back up and growth follows. There's a second payoff that rose growers swear by too. Magnesium is widely used to encourage those basal breaks we talked about earlier, the strong new canes erupting from the base of the plant that rebuild and enlarge the whole bush. Pair an Epsom salt feed in spring with the alfalfa from Trick 3, and you're hitting the plant with everything it needs to push fresh canes from the ground up. It's a tiny, almost insultingly cheap step, but the green up alone is usually worth it. Trick 7. Tuck the roots in and keep them calm. The last trick is about everything happening below the soil, out of sight, where the real growth race is actually won or lost. A rose's roots are surprisingly fussy about one thing: stability. They want even moisture and a steady, cool temperature. The problem is that bare soil gives them neither. It swings hot and cold with the weather, bakes dry in a heat wave, then floods in a downpour. Every one of those swings is a little shock, and a shocked root system keeps pausing growth instead of running steadily. The fix is a good, generous layer of mulch. Spread a thick blanket of organic mulch over the soil around your rose, well-rotted compost, bark, leaf mold, whatever you can get, keeping it pulled back an inch or two from the stems themselves so the base can breathe. That mulch layer is doing several jobs at once. It insulates the roots, smoothing out the temperature swings so the plant can grow without interruption. It holds moisture in the soil so the roots stay evenly hydrated between waterings instead of yo-yoing from soaked to bone dry. It smothers the weeds that would otherwise steal water and nutrients straight out from under your hungry rose. And because it's organic, it slowly breaks down and feeds the soil life beneath it, building exactly the rich, living, crumbly soil that roses adore. While you're thinking about position, here's a small bonus. Roses love morning sun in particular. A spot that catches early light dries the dew off the leaves fast, and dry morning foliage is far less likely to fall to black spot, which loops us right back to keeping those solar panels clean and working. Calm, cool, evenly fed roots beneath a mulch blanket with the morning sun overhead, that's a rose with nothing slowing it down. So let's go back to those two bushes, the tall leafy fountain and the scraggly little thing a few feet away. Now you know exactly what separated them, because every one of these tricks points back to the same idea. Give a rose the fuel and the signals it's actually asking for, and get out of its way. The bigger bush was planted at the right depth, so its bud union was never stressed. It was watered deep and at the roots with its leaves kept dry and disease-free. It was fed like a glutton it is, with a secret hit of alfalfa to spark new canes. It had its flowers stolen before they could set hips, so it never stopped striving. It was pruned hard and open, not timidly. It got a magnesium wake-up for greener leaves and stronger basal breaks, and its roots were tucked under a calm, cool blanket of mulch. The little one got none of that. Do even a few of these for your own roses, and you'll genuinely see 2 to 3 times the growth. Taller, leafier, healthier plants throwing flush after flush of blooms.
Now I want to hear from you. Which of these were you getting wrong? Be honest, for most people it's the watering or the timid pruning, and there's zero shame in it because nearly every beginner guide tells you to do the gentle, cautious version of all of this. Drop a comment and tell me which trick you're trying first, because I read every one and they shape the videos I make next. If this cleared things up for you, do me one quick favor and hit subscribe. It genuinely keeps this channel growing, and there's a whole series of these deep dive growing guides on the way. And before you click off, watch the video popping up on screen right now because it picks up exactly where this one leaves off. Thanks for watching. Go be brave with those roses, and I'll see you in the next one.